This video will guide you through the exact steps that you have to take when importing your product from China. Have you ever felt like Chinese suppliers aren't answering all of your questions and just kind of drip feeding you with answers, and that oftentimes samples that you see in the pictures look nothing like they did look on the picture when you get them in real? Well, it could be because you're taking the wrong steps. When I had my sourcing agency here in China, we sourced more than 1,000 products. And after some time, it was really clear what steps to take and how to avoid mistakes when sourcing your product here in China. So let me guide through all of the steps and the right order of steps that you have to take to successfully import and source your product from China. Step number 1 is getting quotations. Before you even get the quotations, you have to know what product you want. I mean, sure, you know what kind of product you actually want. You know if you want a yoga mat or a phone case, right? But what I mean is more specific. What kind of product specifications do you want? How many units do you want? Make an inquiry for multiple quantities. And you also have to know kind of what's the quality? What is the quality of that you want for your yoga mat? What kind of material do you actually want? How durable should it be? What kind of size do you want? What kind of color? All of these things have to be specified when you're reaching out to suppliers for your product. And the very best thing to reach out to your suppliers is actually if you put together a product inquiry sheet. That already helps you to avoid all this constant back and forth for all your product questions that aren't getting answered, right? So you put together one spreadsheet with product pictures from competitors or something where the supplier can see, well, this is something similar, right? And then you put all your product specifications in there, going from the size, the material, the quality you need, what kind of packaging, what kind of product changes do you want to make? Do you want to change the size? Do you want to change the color, print a logo, or get different packaging? That all has to be in that product inquiry sheet. And if you want to get my product inquiry sheet that I personally used for free, just head over to the links here in the description, join the Easy Peasy Sourcing web class, and you get that sheet for free. Also, the web class is free, and we go over the whole process of sourcing your product in deep detail. So make sure to head over to the description and check out the links. Step number 2 is to calculate your profit margins. I see this so many times. People finally find their product, and you know how long it takes, right? It takes forever to finally make up your mind to get a product. Then it takes a long time to source their product. Usually a lot longer than you think, right? And then once the product is there, people are selling, and the more they sell, the more money they lose. And they wonder why. And that is because they skipped over this step of calculating the profit margin. How much profit can you actually make? So let me go through an example, what kind of cost you have to include to make sure you don't forget anything. The very first number you need is your sales price. What is the price you can sell your product for? And also, more importantly, would you still be profitable if you would have to drop your price by, let's say, 30% because you're running promotions or because competition is coming in? So I always like to play safe and see, well, what happens if I can, or if I have to reduce my price by 30%? That's my sales price, and that's where I'm going for. Then the very first costs you have to deduct from that are your landed costs. Your landed costs are basically all the costs that your product has before it lands at the Amazon warehouse or wherever you ship it to. Okay, so those landed costs are your product costs, including your packaging and your changes and your logo and all of that kind of stuff. It also includes your shipping cost. How much does it actually cost you to ship one unit? And then there's duties. You might have import duties and custom duties and all of these taxes that come on that even before your product is sold. So make sure you find out how much that is, and that are your landed costs. So take your price and minus the 30% and deduct your landed cost, and then we go further. The next thing that people often forget is to deduct your sales fees. Once you sell a product, how much is actually deducted? If you sell via Amazon, how much is the platform charging for that as a sales fee? How much, goes off your product? Make sure you have the sales fee from your platform. The same goes for the storage fees. Sometimes you have to pay storage fees for your product per month. So make sure you know those. Then there's sales tax. A lot of people forget that actually as a business, you have to pay tax. And if you're selling a product, how much is your sales tax? If you didn't, put that on top of the price, then you still have to deduct that from your profit margins. Also, one of the things that people usually forget is to account for returns. Not everyone is going to be happy with your product. Sometimes your product gets damaged, whether that's shipping from China or shipping domestically, or some of the products have faults or whatever happens, but you have to account for refunds. Maybe the customer is just not happy for it and you refund their money. So if you refund 1 out of 10 products, then you have to account for 10% of your landed costs that you have to deduct from that. One of the biggest things, and that the thing that's always the hardest to kind of make up how much it actually is your marketing costs. In Amazon, that can be pay per click. How much money do you have to pay to actually sell a product? Now, if you deduct all of those costs, then you're left with your profit margin. Now, have a look how slim or big your profit margin still is. There is a rule of thumb, so if you don't go through all of these things, the rule of thumb that I always like to look at before I go into details is I like to look at the price that I can sell it for. I like to look at the price that I can buy it for. And if the sales price is not 5 times as high as the buying price, that product doesn't work for me. So for me personally, I always like to have a 5x sales price than the product cost. So that's just a rule of thumb here for you. Hey, by the way, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you never miss out on any new videos we launch here. We're all talking about sourcing, selling, and profiting from your products online. So if you want to be the very first person that's informed when we launch new sourcing hacks and secrets, make sure to hit that subscribe button below right now. Step number 3 is getting product samples. Now, earlier we talked about getting the quotation, including all your product changes and logos and all of that stuff. When it comes to samples, you don't want to do that, because in this step, you just want to find out if the supplier can, deliver on the price that are okay for you and can deliver the quality that you can work with. So for the first samples that you're getting, don't waste your time and order different samples from multiple suppliers, including all your logo changes and color changes and packaging and all of that stuff. It's a huge time waste to do that because you will only want to work with a handful of suppliers anyway. Most of the samples that you will be getting won't look good, so don't waste your time yet. The samples that you're getting initially are just simple samples off the shelf. So ask the supplier, hey, I inquired for this product with all the changes, but do you have that product without all the changes just laying in the shelf? Can you send it to me? I would just like to have a quality impression. That's all you do. Then the best thing is if you have a person in China, like a sourcing agent, that can consolidate all your samples that you're getting from all these suppliers and send it to you in one package, you save a lot of money here on shipping costs for samples. Let me know in the comments, do you usually struggle getting samples with your product changes? Maybe you did a wrong step, right? Maybe you found a supplier that you like without getting a simple sample first and you're trying to go over the whole process of customizing it. Let me know in the comments if you did that mistake before. In step number 4, we can finally choose a supplier. So now you have your quotation, you know what kind of price the product has, you have the samples on hand, you filter out the samples you don't want, you filter out the quotes you don't want, and then you just match. This is the quote I like, this is the sample I like, and you match them. And this way you already found 2 to 3 suppliers within days. Really, it shouldn't take you more than 2 weeks to get to this step. And when I first started out, I was struggling so much to get there because I was doing it in the wrong order that already this step took me 2 months to get there. Now in step 5, now finally is the time for your customized samples. So now after you only have like 2 or 3 suppliers left, that's the time where you reach out to only those 2 or 3 suppliers and say, hey, look, I like to have now a sample. I like your quality. Can you now make me a sample with all of the changes I wanted? And then you go over all the changes again, and then you get your logo, and then you get your packaging, and then you make the changes on your product, and then you get the first samples. Also, this is really cool to just see, how to work with which of the suppliers. During that process of customizing your sample, that's what takes the longest time. And that's the time where you have most of the contact with the actual supplier. And during that time, you can get a gut feeling and see, well, what supplier do I actually like to work with? Sometimes you have to be willing to pay a higher price for your product just because you have a better supplier. Because keep in mind, your supply chain is so important. What if your supplier stops delivering your product? What if they increase the prices? What if they drop the quality? That's all not good. So if you have a really good impression about your supplier, that's the one you should go with. And the other suppliers that kind of fall through the net again, well, they can always be your backup suppliers. So now in your last step, you get multiple rounds of samples, and that's step number 6. After you get those samples, because usually how it works is that you order things with certain changes, and then they send you the product sample and they forgot one of the changes, and then you send them back. They say, hey, you forgot to print my logo. The sample is blue, just like I wanted, but you forgot to print my logo. And then you go back to them and they send you another one. And now the sample got your logo, but it's red. I say, well, look, I still need the product to be blue and have my logo. And then I send it back to you and it's blue and it has your logo, but your logo is upside down. And then you go back to them again. And you see, this is what really takes the longest time, because you have to go back and forth a couple of times. Don't get frustrated. It's just how it is. And again, if you have someone in China to check those samples for you, they can immediately tell, well, the product isn't blue, it's red, right? And then they can go back to the factory and say, hey, please send me another sample, without you having to wait for them to ship it all the way to your doorstep for you to check it yourself. So now I'm going to show you some outtakes video for your entertainment. And while you watch this, make sure to check the links below in the description to check out the free easy peasy sourcing web class. You're going to learn all about how to find a supplier in China without getting screwed by Alibaba suppliers. It's a complete free web class. Make sure to check that out in the links and enjoy the outtake. So now I'm going to show you some outtakes from this video. And the very first of taking different steps that were the good ones. Once you sell a product, how many... Now, you talked about earlier